Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, third part thereof for the 7th of December 2024. One of my sons has just stolen my headphones because he's a bust, because he's got a Fortnite tournament and I feel deeply weird. You spend so long with things wrapped around your head and when they're slightly different, you're like, ooh. Okay, we're going to start with an article actually in the Times newspaper that gives an indication of the growing threat that Russia is presenting to, well, the UK here, but you could say the EU, the US, the world as a whole. So, stretched MI5 forced to prioritise Russia over terrorists, says Chief. Ken McCallum, the MI5 chief, told a civil service podcast it only had finite resources but was facing grander and more sophisticated attacks from aggressive nation states. This is like, just to remind you of the generations of warfare. We've gone through, first generation warfare through to fifth generation warfare. Fifth generation warfare is now like hybrid warfare, information war, etc., etc. But the fourth generation of warfare that went through? So I think third generation was that kind of nuclear. First was it was a kind of technological advance through these different generations, and then it was a movement from nation states warring with each other to things like ISIS, which crossed nations, terrorists. You were fighting not nation states. And it was like, okay, we need to really react to this. And so MI5 was reacting to fourth generation warfare with a completely different way of doing things. It wasn't kind of bugging Russian embassies and following spies around. This was a case of, oh my goodness, we've got 17-year-olds sitting in their rooms being radicalized, and then, then going out to Syria to fight for ISIS, or possibly, stabbing people in London, or trying to do a bomb here or there or whatever. So we've got these different versions or different manifestations of warfare. Now here we've got McCallum saying, like, MI5 has been forced to pare back its focus on counter-terrorism. So that's the kind of fourth generation warfare with terrorism being done by these small non-state actors. And we're moving back to dealing with state actors. So to deal with the growing threat posed by Russia and other hostile states. Ken McCallum, the Director General of MI5, said Britain was facing a generational challenge as it attempted to deal with grander and more sophisticated attacks from aggressive states. He said that the attacks included sabotage, arson and assassinations on British soil. McCallum said that the UK had only finite resources to deal with those threats and that he had been forced to make uncomfortable choices on where to focus the service's efforts. He said, quote, "We now face much, much more aggression from nation states. In effect, we had the 20 to 30 year holiday from that kind of big player, sophisticated states in serious conflict with each other. It's back, I'm afraid." And so there is something quite profound about that. We've had to make some of those uncomfortable choices in recent years. How can we pare back a bit on the amount of our capacity we are spending on countering terrorism in order to be ready to meet those somewhat grander and more sophisticated, in some respects, threats from nation states? McCallum also said that MI5 was having to respond to a growing terror threat from teenagers who, quote, consume too much of the wrong things on the internet. 1 in 8 of those being monitored by MI5 is under the age of 18. Wow. Anyway, back to the kind of nation state thing. So there have been growing numbers of attacks on British soil by Russia and other hostile states. It has been linked to 14 deaths on British soil. This is where we go back to the issue of triggering Article 5 of NATO. When is this war? When is this version of war serious enough to trigger Article 5? And of course, we're afraid to go to war. We don't want to go to war with Russia. And that allows Russia to push the envelope. Oh, we'll just burn this place down. We'll kill this place. We'll kill this person. And these things happen, and it's like, oh, it's not, they haven't invaded us with tanks, and therefore it doesn't trigger Article 5. But technically, it should trigger Article 5. These are acts of war on the UK, on UK soil. So it has been linked to 14 deaths on British soil, including the murder of Alexander Litvinenko, an opponent of President Putin who had been poisoned with polonium. Sergei Skripal, a former Russian military intelligence officer who became a double agent for the UK, survived after being poisoned with the nerve agent Novichok. Moscow's also blamed after a parcel caught fire at a DHL logistics centre on the outskirts of Birmingham earlier this year. It was among parcels said to contain incendiary devices disguised as electric massage machines. Wow. So on and so forth. Interesting article there. And it goes to show that Russia really are a threat to global security, and they should be taken seriously. Unfortunately, some areas of the world they're not taking as seriously as they should be. Now, good old Władysław Sikorski, the foreign minister for Poland, husband of Anne Applebaum, was pretty acerbic at the OSCE conference in Malta this week. This wasn't necessarily the most diplomatic of speeches at the OSCE, but it certainly was truthful, to the point, and effective, says Carl Bildt. Let's listen to Władysław Sikorski. It's 1 minute 50, but I think, you know, when people give good speeches like this, we need to listen to them.
Minister Borg, colleagues, Elena has just reminded us the origins of this organization, the Helsinki process. It was basically a grand bargain between the then communist bloc, which sought the confirmation of borders in Europe, and the then West, which wanted respect for human rights in the Soviet bloc. Today, Russia respects neither borders nor human rights. There are no free media in Russia, there are no honest elections, and there are more political prisoners there than in the Soviet Union under Leonid Brezhnev at the time of Helsinki. When the Soviet Union collapsed, we encouraged Russia to become a normal democratic nation state. But they failed. It proved too difficult to emerge from their own political culture. Russia's rulers chose the path of aggressive, repressive kleptocracy. My message to the Russian delegation is the following. We are not taken in by your lies. We know what you're doing. You're trying to rebuild the Russian empire, and we will not let you. We will resist you every inch of the way.
Brilliant.
You are successful in destroying Ukraine, but you're also destroying the future of your own country.
Yes.
Until you stop this brutal war, you shouldn't be here.
Yes. Boom. Drop that mic. Absolutely brilliant from Sikorski. And I think it was Ross Phillips last night in the live stream, which I advise you to go and watch. And by the way, thank you to JR. I keep forgetting to thank JR. JR, you helped behind the scenes, and I forgot to thank you at the end of the live stream. For all you do, you're a legend. But yeah, Ross Phillips was saying last night in the live stream, there seems to be this element of, well, at least certain parliamentarians in Europe, certain political figures, being much more explicit in their condemnation of Russia. And I think Sikorski is one, David Lammy's another. We have Ursula von der Leyen, we've got Emmanuel Macron. I think it's really great to hear. What I am deeply upset about is that we don't hear that kind of rhetoric from Trump, from Vance, and from a lot in the American administration coming in. In fact, we hear appeasement and fawning over Russia as opposed to what we should be hearing, which is a massive condemnation of Russia and their actions. So Georgian opposition politician has been detained by the police as the crackdown has continued on the 9th day of mass protests. That's last night. Georgian police detained Sotney Kobaridze, a politician and member of the Coalition for Change opposition group, amid government crackdowns on the pro-EU protests in the country. And in fact, I think there have been others who have been rounded up. It's not been pretty scenes watching there. Russian-backed government thugs on all over the streets of Tbilisi, now capturing anyone standing around. Georgia is now Belarus, says Jane Kiev. This is it's pretty sad to see stuff like this. It's horrible, really, as autocracy is now appearing to be gaining more of more control over those protesters. Russian-backed government thugs with no identification, capturing people all over the centre of Tbilisi. And we're seeing more and more of this. So it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like tonight. I really do hope that they are able to stand up to this thuggery and this autocracy. Oman's SVOBR troops from Russia, moving groups of at least 200 people. Equip yourself with weapons, says one person here. This is a warning to all Europeans and especially the Americans to what to come to all of you if you don't start to wake up and start to vote vote for Democratic candidates. Don't democratically backslide. It is something that's very difficult to reverse. Now, here I've already shown you this, but this is your man who's an identified FSB agent working for the Tatushki, I presume the kind of paid up thugs. He's got a gun here, which is an absolute shocker. So he gets his gun out. I think he does in a second. Waves it around a little bit, but he is on the streets of Tbilisi, showing that actually the Russians are heavily involved there. The leaders of various, so then we go from Georgia to Romania. The leaders of various crime families and a whole myriad of TikTok influencers that has supported Georgescu's presidential bid have now begun to flee the country. So Georgescu, who came first in the presidential elections because he was supported by that dodgy TikTok campaign with money, it appears, from Russia, and has had a certain bunch of followers in Romania, but because it was all somewhat illegal by the looks of it, which is why the elections have been called again, those people who were supporting him higher up the food chain have suddenly done a runner. Just a few days ago, Georgescu promised to pardon all of those people all at once if he won the election. And now, if you if you want proof that the Russian bots and trolls were indeed working in the Romanian presidential election, that the TikTok influencers were indeed Russian bots and trolls, or whatever social media platform you might think about, there are Georgescu bots still encouraging people to vote for him on the 8th of December. So these would be pre-programmed bots who are going about saying, make sure you vote for Georgescu on the 8th of December, even though the election has now been cancelled. Of course, they need to be reprogrammed and whatnot, but they're still saying what they've been programmed to say, assuming that the election was going to take place on the 8th tomorrow. So they're coming out saying, make sure you vote for Georgescu. Yeah, mate, it's been cancelled. So there is proof that in my opinion, or at least confirmatory evidence, that these profiles on social media are, certainly in that case, bots. Now, I was already having a spectacular day, says this source, but Jackson Hinkle having a total meltdown is making it even better. The minute Russia realises spending money on the elections interference and propaganda abroad doesn't pay off, they'll cut this clown off too. He'd better start searching for a job. So Jackson Hinkle, a couple of tweets from him. Romania is corrupt beyond belief. The military must raise hell and revolt. NATO has launched a coup on Romania. Romanians must stand up and fight back. Take back your country. As we're all sitting here going, thank goodness they've annulled the election. Look at the clear Russian influence, and Jackson Hinkle's right on the other side of the coin, saying, oh, this is all terrible. We want people like Georgescu to succeed. Well, as I talked to you, discussed earlier, you got Donald Trump Jr. as well saying, wow, look at what's happening in Romania. The Constitutional Court just cancelled the first round of the presidential election. Another Soros Marxist attempt. Ugh. I bet he doesn't even know what Marxism is. At rigging the outcome and denying the will of the people. She's going to lose, and they know it, talking about Lasconi. So Donald Trump Jr. comes out in support of the far-right candidate in Romania after it was revealed that Russia ran a coordinated online campaign to help him get elected. Who could have seen this coming? I mean, just honestly, you need to be, if you're a big supporter of Trump, you need to be thinking, is he really the right, is he really surrounding himself with the right people? What can we make of his son? Since actually it appears that Donald Trump doesn't have, well, there's no particular evidence that his politics and his opinions are that different from Donald Trump Jr. And yet this man has a platform that is spouting pro-Russian propaganda. It is terrible, absolutely terrible. And, need we remind ourselves that the Russians have got a very good back catalogue of incidents of interfering with foreign elections and disinformation campaigns. Brexit 2016, Trump 2016, proof. Catalan independence 2017, Marine Le Pen 2017 and 2022, far-right candidate in France. German federal elections in 2017 and 2021. Moldova 2020, 2021 and 2024. Slovakia in 2023 with Robert Fico, and then is it Pellegrini, the presidential winner. Georgia in 2024. Romania in 2024. But Romania did something about it, which is great. But as far as the other nations are concerned, those problems have either resulted in compromised parties being elected. Think Georgia, think Slovakia, or in Moldova, it was just wafer thin. Or we've got situations like Germany and France here that are still well in the crosshairs of the Kremlin. And of course, you can argue Trump too in 2024, which is not mentioned here. But I would throw Trump in. I'd throw the elections in 2020 and 2024, the American elections, which huge interference with by the Russians on social media. Right, moving on to look at Syria. It's incredible what's happened. So on some maps, you've got all of this being pink here, pinkish, or all of it apart from this small area down here. Now you've got this area not appearing to be like being fully contested, with ISIS thrown in the middle. So these kind of patches are ISIS. You've got another map that the one I've been showing you looks something like this. Let's bring it up. I just thought I'm not going to talk too much about Syria, but just show you the map. So this is the other map I've shown you previously, but it's not showing. I don't think it's been updated as much. In fact, there must be. It's got way more white over there, so I think there must be some cookies or something on here. The cache seems to be a bit dodgy. Anyway, you've got a massive area here. That's November the 29th. That could be why. So if I change that date, then it would look somewhat different. Anyway, let's do that. See if it comes up. .svg. No, I've messed that up. Anyway, you get the point. Maps will be somewhat different because this is really dynamic and things are moving very, very quickly. We go to this map. You got the ISIS and contested areas. You've got rebels moving in from the north, assisted by Turkey over here, and America in this yellow area. Then you've got this is what is a white patch on the other map, and they have now taken Hama. They are pretty much taking Homs. And you're starting to see Damascus apparently being surrounded at the moment, as you've got rebels moving up from the south as well. Then you've got some over here too, being backed. These are US-backed groups over here. So my goodness, it's all happening all over Turkey, all over Syria at the moment. Here's another interpretation of the map, different colours, but you get the point. So we are seeing a complete capitulation of the SAA, the Assad regime forces, who are apparently abandoning checkpoints, literally not as the rebels arrived, but like a day before. There was one tweet I was looking at was talking about how they're not abandoning them today, they abandoned them yesterday. They have gone. You've got claims that 2,000 troops have tried to cross the border, I think into Iraq. You've got all sorts of things going on there, and it looks like the days are numbered. I mean, they really, really are for the Assad regime forces. I don't think there's a way back for them now, and obviously that will have an effect on Russia and the Russian forces. Okay, moving on, South Korea. So there was the South Korean president. He called martial law. Then there was this move to impeach him. He apologized for martial law, and then the impeachment didn't get through Parliament, and he then remains in charge, even though there should have been the votes for that. So I don't know the finer details. Anyway, an estimated 150,000 people have been out on the streets of Seoul in protest of the president. So they gathered in Seoul demanding the president's resignation. Impeachment requires 200 parliamentary votes. That was it. So maybe because they had enough, so it's obviously a super majority because they had enough for a simple majority, I'm sure, for impeachment. But only 192 were secured as the ruling party People Power boycotts the process. There were only a couple of the the parliamentarians from the president's own party that actually turned up to vote. Anyway, that has happened, and how does that affect Ukraine? Well, actually, as far as I understand it, and I don't really know too much about South Korean politics, the opposition would be even more in favour of Ukraine. So you kind of want the president to be kind of thrown out. I think there is my take on it, but I could be wrong. Zelensky meets with Austrian Chancellor in Paris. So the Notre Dame Cathedral is reopening, and there are lots of dignitaries from around the world meeting there for this very important cultural event for France. And indeed, you've got Trump there. Trump and Zelensky have already met by the looks of it. Anyway, Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer has met with Zelensky. Nehammer supports efforts, quote, to achieve a comprehensive, just and lasting peace, and suggests that Vienna be the location for peace talks, as it is the capital of a neutral country, always ready to host future peace talks, says Nehammer to Zelensky directly there. So they have met. Lots of people, I presume, have met there. It's kind of an excuse to get together and have these face-to-face meetings. Indeed, Zelensky's met with Salome Zurabishvili, the Georgian president, who's pro-EU and pro-West and pro-Ukraine, not from the Georgian Dream Party. She said this position of Ukraine inspires Georgians to further resistance. Now, moving on to the US, and actually, do we have Trump for... Yes, so here is Trump meeting with Macron and Zelensky. Interesting, Max24 has pointed out he's wearing blue and yellow. Could that be a pro-Ukraine? A bit of wardrobe there from Trump? No, I sincerely doubt it. But anyway, happy to see that. Right, Chancellor Scholz has discussed a joint Ukraine strategy with US President-elect Donald Trump, according to Funke. Scholz expressed confidence in uniting efforts for, quote, ending the killings as soon as possible and ensuring Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. That first bit is something that Trump keeps talking about. Like, we want to stop the killing, the too many deaths. But this part seems to be what most other countries are very much emphasizing. Ukraine's sovereignty and independence needs to be maintained. So they have met. Now, going on to US politics and the DOD, because we want to make sure that someone pro-Ukraine and someone who's actually pretty decent is in charge of the DOD. And at the moment, we've got Pete Hegseth that is just getting mired and mired in more and more controversy. The list of officers to fire, compiled by the American Accountability Foundation, includes 20 general officers or senior admirals and a disproportionate number of female officers, of course. It has had a chilling effect on the Pentagon's often frank discussions. What you are seeing post-election in the US are a bunch of wingnut organizations that, like, the Overton window of what's acceptable to discuss has shifted. And now you can pretty much discuss anything in American politics, and it seems like there is an air of acceptability. And there are these wingnut organizations that appear to be giving the oxygen of consideration. And they are around and about the Trump administration. It's deeply, deeply worrying. So the Accountability Foundation here wanting to get rid of a load of woke generals and officers and admirals, and particularly women, from the armed forces, and that's exactly what Hegseth wants to do. But it's causing a bit of a shadow to creep across the Pentagon at the moment. Now, Trump has come out and talked about Syria in a Truth Social post here. Am I going to bother reading it? I found this interesting because Trump clearly didn't write this. Now, we've known for a long time that Trump doesn't write his tweets. I want to know how many tweets he does write. So we already know from previous articles that, for example, here is a Trump aide or former Trump aide, what's her name, Madeleine Westerhout, who talked about how she used to write tweets, or was he dictated them, or she'd bring them back the tweets and he would circle the words that he wanted capitalized and more exclamation marks, etc., etc. Then there's Dan Scavino. So, you know, he tweets so often, and or Truth Socials or whatever you want to call it, so often and at such a range of times of the day and night that there's no way that he can do it. And you look at this and you have to have a good grasp of English, written English, to do this. So the demarcation, like just from a technical point of view, as a writer and editor myself, and someone that's kind of taught this stuff, that you had to have a good understanding of the demarcation of clauses to understand how to use commas effectively and correctly. And these are really, some of these are complex sentences and compound sentences as well, and they are demarcated correctly. And there's no way that Trump would know how to do that as someone that doesn't read and someone that yeah, anyway. So Trump didn't write this at all, and it reads like Trump didn't write this. In fact, let's read it. Opposition fighters in Syria, in an unprecedented move, have totally taken over numerous cities in a highly coordinated offensive and are now on the outskirts of Damascus, obviously preparing to make a very big move toward taking out Assad. Now, I would say that's an unnecessarily long and complex sentence there. Or is it? Is it just a very long compound sentence? Anyway, but it's demarcated absolutely correctly. So Russia, because they are so tied up in Ukraine, and with the loss there of over 600,000 soldiers, seems incapable of stopping this literal march through Syria, a country they have protected for years. I mean, this reads like an educational text to some degree. This is where former President Obama refused to honour his commitment of protecting the, all caps, red line in the sand, comma, and all hell broke out with Russia stepping in. But now they are, like possibly Assad himself, being forced out, and it may actually be the best thing that can happen to them. There was never much of a benefit in Syria for Russia other than to make Obama look really stupid. In any event, Syria is a mess, but is not our friend, and the United States should have nothing to do with it, all caps. This is not our fight. Let it play out. Do not get involved. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting because he didn't write that, and I'm not sure he would know all that. And yeah, so just be wary, be wary, because this isn't technically that should be like, even though they aren't in the White House now, that should be a White House statement, not a Donald Trump statement, because you would think that he wrote that and that's personally him. Now, when it comes to speeches, we know that speechwriters write all the president's speeches these days. Although they'll have input onto that process. But you kind of understand it. But at least that person is standing there and saying it. So, they fully sanction this. Now, there's a little bit of murkiness to do with things like social media posts and who's actually writing them and how much they are given the green light by, in this case, Donald Trump. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting because I read that and it's like, he never even remotely wrote this. And then I started researching actually who does write his tweets and et cetera, et cetera. But there's also some interesting, I always say, focus on the little things. So there's something here that spoke to me, which is there was never much of a benefit in Syria for Russia other than to make Obama look really stupid. This is Trump getting more joy out of Russia making Obama look stupid than wanting Russia to be seen as the bad guys. The way that is framed is actually more charitable to Russia than it is to Obama. And that fits in so much with the polarization of American politics at the moment, whereby the bad guys are the enemy from within, are the other party. The Democrats are the bad guys. Russia, yeah, whatever, they're not really the bad guys, the bad guy. And Trump says this, doesn't he? He said this on the campaign trail a number of times. The enemy from within. He's talking about Pelosi and Schiff and so on and so forth. Those are the real enemies. And you can read that in here, in the way that he's constructed, or his team has constructed that sentence. And then he says, in any event, Syria is a mess, but is not our friend, and the United States should have nothing to do with it. The United States has a lot to do with Syria. They are striking and have struck with planes and drones and what have you at targets in Syria. They are deeply, deeply involved in Syria. So personally, if I was writing this for Trump, I would have said some of the same things as this, but just kept it way more vague. Don't put things like, and the United States should have nothing to do with it. It's not our fight. You've got in, you've won your election. You don't need to keep appealing to these people who think that you're going to pull out of everything around the world to do this. The job for, in my opinion, the job for someone like Trump or any kind of leader is strategic ambiguity, because it might come a time where actually you realize that you do need to be doing stuff in Syria, or you might get convinced that doing stuff in Syria is really important. Now, if it doesn't really matter to your electorate because you've just won the election, whatever, don't keep trying to appeal to them necessarily. You need to be thinking strategically, which is, I don't want to be hoisted by my own petard, right? I don't want to say something that I'm eventually going to regret. So I want to say a lot while saying a little, and not really saying things too explicitly. So you say things like you say there was never much of a benefit in Syria for Russia. Okay, you might want to say something like that. In any event, Syria is a mess, but it's not our friend. Okay, we can get away with that because Assad is not our friend. And then just give it that, leave it there and say things like, we need to just let this play out. That's fine. Let's let this play out, see what happens, and let's hope the people of Syria can find their own power and that democracy will ensue, or something like that. Something kind of vague and positive like that. But you start saying we should have nothing to do with it, we need to pull out, this is not our fight. But, let it play out. Don't get involved now is possibly more correct, but I don't know. I just think there's a naivety sometimes with and I've said this about Biden and about Scholz and about certain people. We draw our own red lines. We just say we are not going to do this. We are going. You don't need to say it. Just don't say that. You've not been asked directly. Don't say it. Don't come out and present red lines for yourself. This is a kind of red line that Trump has drawn for himself. It's like, we have absolutely no need to get involved in Syria. You don't know what crazy crap's going to go on in Syria going forward. Just keep your options open, mate. The world is a crazy place. And Applebaum says, of course he has, in reaction to the Washington Post article, President-elect Trump is stacking his cabinet with billionaires and centimillionaires whose financial entanglements pose conflict of interest challenges. I do worry about, just from a position of corruption and then how this plays out, when you have Ukraine looking to the EU and looking to America as their model of freedom of democracy, and you're thinking, here is Ukraine fighting against autocracy and oligarchy from the East, from Russia, and a corruption that is absolutely infested Russia for many decades. That corruption that has been seeping over the border into Ukraine and into Ukrainian politics. You want to get rid of that corruption, and you want to look to, in this case, the West, for a model of how you should run a government. And you see that kind of oligarchy taking place, in that plutocracy taking place in the US. It is stunning, and it's heartbreaking for me. So, Trump is a billionaire. Elon Musk, Doge at the heart of the White House, is a billionaire. Vivek Ramaswamy, Doge, billionaire. And unelected. These people were not democratically elected. They weren't voted in. No one voted for Doge. No one voted for Musk and Ramaswamy. Right? So these are, I think, oligarchs in the center of the decision-making processes. Linda McMahon, Education Secretary, billionaire. Doug Burgum, Interior Secretary, billionaire. Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary, billionaire. Scott Bessant, Treasury Secretary, billionaire. Charles Kushner, Ambassador to France, billionaire. Warren Stevens, Ambassador to UK, billionaire. Jared Isaacman, NASA, billionaire. Kelly Loeffler, SBA, billionaire. Steve Witkoff, Middle East, billionaire. But sure, these are the people who are focused on the cost of eggs. Got it. These people are somehow the ones that are going to look after the little man's interests. Yeah, they've experienced what it's like to live off, Social Security. They've experienced what it's like to be underinsured or uninsured for medical needs in the US, where you've got this kind of weird medical landscape. No, they're not at all like that. These people are not representative of the American people. And I think this is the whole, again, to use a phrase, landscape, the whole political landscape in the US is not great. It's not good at all. And I think, if you are Ukraine thinking, yeah, we want to be part of the West, and you look to the West and this is what you see, you're thinking, how different is this to the billionaires from the oil and gas magnates and diamond magnates Russia. How different is this really from the Kremlin? Wow, just yeah, right. And now we could go through a Vatnik soup. Yeah, it's a lot. Let's do it because I found this quite interesting. So although yeah, I'm not a big fan of Trump. Okay, get it, but positive things could happen with regard to Ukraine if things go right under Trump. I'm not saying that they definitely won't. But let's have a look at his connection to Russia, as told through Pekka Kallioniemi, that when he does his Vatnik suits, to give you a greater contextual understanding of these individuals. Because actually, there are many of us who know Trump from The Apprentice, but actually just have a very veneer, a very shallow understanding of who he is. So Kallioniemi says, I'll introduce an American politician, media personality and businessman, Donald Trump. He's best known for serving as the 45th president of the US and for promoting pro-Kremlin viewpoints regarding Putin and the Russia-Ukrainian war. Now, this would have been written probably sometime in 2023. So this is possibly an old one. He's doing all the ones he did previously on Twitter. He's now redoing them on Blue Sky. So this will not take into account probably very, very recent things, although he may have added to it, and the fact that he's now president again. After becoming the president of his father's real estate ventures in the early 70s, he started expanding its operations aggressively by building hotels, casinos and whatnot. Trump's businesses have been involved in over 4,000 legal actions, and he's filed for bankruptcy 6 times. So the idea that he's some great businessman is empirically not true. While studying in college during the Vietnam War era, Trump deferred draft 4 times. After his graduation, he was diagnosed with bone spurs, thus avoiding going to war. This diagnosis allegedly made by a podiatrist, Dr. Larry Brownstein, who rented his office from Donald's father, Fred Trump. Dr. Brownstein's daughters later said that they know the diagnosis was a favor to Donald's father. Yuri Shvets, a former Soviet... This is why it's so insulting when he calls US POWs suckers and losers and whatnot. And you're like, really? Really, with your background? Yuri Shvets, a former Soviet intelligence officer who worked as a major in the KGB from 1980 to 90, was a resident spy in DC between 1985 and 1987. Has stated that Trump was cultivated as a Russian asset over 40 years and provided so willing to para anti-Western propaganda that there were celebrations in Moscow. According to Shvets, KGB considered Trump as extremely vulnerable intellectually and psychologically. I mean, wow. And here are some newspaper articles to support some of these claims. But that's incredible. So he was extremely vulnerable intellectually and psychologically, quote. And also vulnerable to flattery, which we know, and I talk about this an awful lot. Based on journalist Craig Unger's book, American Compromat, Trump first appeared in the KGB's radar in 1977 when he married Ivana Zelnikova. When Trump visited Moscow and St. Petersburg, he was flattered by the KGB operatives, also floating the idea that Trump should get into politics. Soon after returning from this trip, Trump started looking into possible presidential run in the Republican Party and ran a full-page ad on the New York Times criticizing US foreign policy. So, yeah, there we go. There's a few references to look at there. Trump has had a lot of business interests in Russia. He had undertaken a project to build a Trump skyscraper in Moscow. This idea came to be during his visit to Moscow in 1987 and was later pushed by Felix Sater, the Russian-born businessman and with mob connections. So the Trump organization planned to give Vladimir Putin the $50 million penthouse in Trump Tower, Moscow. And then the timeline of the potential Trump Tower project in Moscow there on NPR. In 2008, he sold a Palm Beach mansion to Russian oligarch Dmitry Rybolovlev for $95 million US, while 4 years prior he only paid $41 million for the estate. Even though the Mueller report didn't conclude conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians, an initiative called Moscow Project 272, initiative called Moscow Project found 272 known contracts and 38 known meetings between the Trump team and Russia-linked operatives. Okay, so why did a Russian pay $95 million to buy Trump's Palm Beach mansion? Now, just to give you an understanding here, if foreign money can't be used to support a political campaign, then how can you get money from Russia to an American political campaign or someone who is campaigning? Well, you can buy their property for $50 million over what it's worth. So Trump bought that for $41 million just a few years before, and then sold it for $95 million a few years later. And oh my goodness, Trump has now got $95 million. How is he going to use that money? Why is he being paid that much? And I would argue that that is a way of Russia bribing people in America. And there's no doubt that Russian influence has Pekka in the US 2016 presidential election about it there. Days before Trump became president in 2017, the Obama administration released an Intelligence Community Assessment, ICA, which assessed that the Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the US presidential election. So there you go, and we'll look through some of these. I just flash them up on the screen. You can pause them. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the US democratic process, denigrate Secretary Hillary Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. And here you can see some of the evidence for all of these things. And then we move on. A few more here. Trump ignored these reports, and in 2017 he said that he had spoken with Putin about forming a cyber unit with Russia to fight election hacking. And of course, this was at the time of the Helsinki summit, which I've routinely said was the worst moment of Trump's political career. Although, goodness me, there are some pretty tough fights on his hands there for that mantle. This is when he came out and sided with Putin above his own intelligence agencies. But yeah. So how did Donald Trump help Russia and Putin? First of all, he, quote, watered down the toughest penalties the US had imposed on Russian entities after Putin annexed Crimea in 2014. He even questioned sanctions altogether, stating that why would anyone have sanctions if somebody's doing some really great things? In other words, rather like I've been worried about him reducing sanctions or lifting sanctions on Russia right now when he comes in, when he comes in after January the 20th. And I think that would be the biggest gift to Russia. He actually has priors for that, and he did that post sanctions of 2014 from Obama after. I know that wasn't strong enough, but then Trump comes in and then wants to lift those sanctions because, hey, people are doing great things. In the Wall Street Journal here, reporting Trump open to a shift on Russia sanctions, one China policy. So he wanted to lift those sanctions. He also supported Russia's return to the G7 and eased sanctions on Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska. Of course, Deripaska, who was involved with Paul Manafort, who was a campaign manager for Donald Trump. Who knew? Join the dots, peeps. Join the dots. In 2017, Trump revealed highly classified information to Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and to the Russian ambassador. Oh dear, that's just so sad, isn't it? And to the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak, Treasury Department lists sanctions on 3 Russian firms with ties to Oleg Deripaska. Trump open to shift on Russia sanctions. Trump privately clashed with G7 leaders over re-inviting Putin. And Trump revealed highly classified information to Russian foreign minister and ambassador. This is who your man Trump is. So for all of you Trump lovers out there, America's first patriot, etc., like, if this was whether you're genuinely American or not, if this is what had been done by people on the Democratic side, you would be hopping with anger. But it's okay when it's Trump, right? He gets a free pass. US media was not allowed to this meeting, but there was a Russian photographer present. On many occasions, Trump has praised Putin, calling him a genius and savvy. And after Putin invaded Ukraine, he said that Putin has done a really great job outsmarting our country.
That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen.
Depressing. That's him on. In fact, actually, this is a relatively short one. Let's listen to this from MSNBC.
Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right. No, but think of it. Here's a guy who's very savvy. I know him very well. Very, very well. Putin is now...
Yeah, so really loves himself some Putin and some army tanks. In 2019, he temporarily froze US aid worth $391 million for Ukraine. The Trump administration had previously stalled sales of Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine in fear of angering Russia and Putin. And of course, he wanted some dirt on Biden, didn't he? So Trump also hired Paul Manafort, who had spent a good decade promoting pro-Russian politics in Ukraine, to run his 2016 presidential campaign. He was later sentenced to over 7 years in prison. One of the crimes was for evading taxes on the $60 million he made in Ukraine. So Manafort sentenced to additional 43 months in prison. There's one article, another one, day 4. Accountant testifies how she helped hide Manafort's Ukraine income. Before leaving his presidency, Trump pardoned 5 people who were convicted as a result of investigations on the Russian interference in the 2016 US elections, including Michael Flynn, Roger Stone, and Paul Manafort. So when you worry about Hunter Biden getting pardoned, I don't think that has anything on the... that's not national security issues. That's just a drug-addicted son who's made some stupid decisions. This, in my opinion, is far more nefarious. And yes, Hunter Biden was involved in Ukraine to some degree, etc., etc. He also pardoned GOP strategist Jesse Benton, who was sentenced again in February 2023 for funneling Russian money into the Trump campaign. I will repeat that, sentenced in 2023 for funneling Russian money into the Trump campaign. Trump's style of politics, almost wholly based on lies. Actually, after becoming the president, Trump's lying became so common that the Washington Post started tracking the factuality of his statements with their fact-checking department. By January 2021, Trump had lied over 30,000 times during his term as president. You can read Pekka's previous thread on this type of post-truth politics, which I think we did previously. And this is news of Jesse Benton, GOP strategist sentenced to 18 months over Russian contribution to Trump's 2016 campaign. There you go. You know, people have been found guilty in a court of law for funneling Russian money into his 2016 campaign. There you go. Recently, Trump was hit with yet another set of charges, this time federal. An investigation found that he held classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago resort. He even discussed over classified war plan documents with people who had no security clearance, and the whole boxes in. Look, these are all classified documents. I mean, it's horrendous. And of course, those cases have now been dismissed because Merrick Garland was too much of a wuss to actually go through and get them sorted earlier. He was cautious, didn't want to upset the apple cart, and that's why the Democrats get rolled over, because they're not nearly as... Republicans, they don't care. Pri and Kash Patel, let's go retributively after the Democrats and let's take them to town. Democrats getting in like, oh, we want to do things, properly, rule of law, etc., but they just roll over and let their bellies get rubbed. So Merrick Garland, I think, has an awful lot of answering to do as the Attorney General. Lately, he's been trying to pin the blame on his aide, Walt Nauta. So this is going back some time. There are at least 7 cases between 2017 and 2023 where US citizens have been sentenced under the Espionage Act to prison time for storing classified documents at home. And here are the supporting statements and whatnot and articles. What could Trump's presidency mean to Ukraine? Even though the support from the US has been strongly bipartisan, he could have some veto power over military and humanitarian aid. Also, the sanctions against Russia could be eased or even lifted. Either way, Ukraine will prevail, says Pekka with some confidence, but I'm not so confident. I am most worried about lifting sanctions, and it really... there's a correction, actually. The now the Truth Social post was a fake one, but I think that's a good overview into Donald Trump, and I do worry about lifting of sanctions. I do worry that he's just broadly quite compromised by Russia, and the connections have been there for all too long. And I think the same can be said about many of these people, David Sachs, Elon Musk, etc., etc. And why people still believe these men who lie through their teeth. As Pekka Kallioniemi says about Elon Musk, it's wild that there's still people who believe on Elon Musk. Elon Musk, remember, said and look at the date here, this is I presume this is American dating, so it's possibly the 6th of March, but it could be the 3rd of June, 2024. So this is this year. Just to be super clear, I'm not donating money to either candidate for US president. How much did he donate in the end to Trump? Was it over 100? Is it 130 million? I'm not donating. Just to be super clear, I'm not donating. Oh, I've gone and done it. And Elon Musk said, remember previously, Trump would be 82 at the end of the term, which is too old to be chief executive of anything, let alone the United States of America. And then he just fully backed him to the hill. That's what he initially thought. 82 is well too old. What happened to those ideas? What happened to those claims? Anyway, I just deeply worry that there's an awful lot of money at the centre of the American government. There's an awful lot of conflicts of interest. There's an awful lot of natural resources that certain people like Elon Musk, I think, need from China and Russia. And it's interesting that Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk actually have previously slagged each other off. They're now thrown together in this marriage of convenience, I guess, in Doge. But actually, one of them, Elon Musk likes, he likes the free market, and he doesn't like tariffs unless when those tariffs benefit him, such as tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. So he talks about, oh, amazing, Argentina have got rid of all their tariffs, well done. And then he says, oh yeah, we want to tariff Chinese goods. So, Elon Musk is a bit all over the shop. Well, Vivek Ramaswamy came out recently in favour of some kind of stripping out of NASA or something, and that would have affected Elon Musk's SpaceX contracts or something like that, and that caused a big argument for them. And of course, Elon Musk is fundamentally compromised in that position in Doge in the centre of the government. And I just think, you spare a thought for Ukraine that's looking to the West going, this is what we aspire to. And you get an absolute shit show that is American politics at the moment, which is fundamentally oligarchic. And in fact, there was a paper that came out some time ago suggesting it was indeed now an oligarchy, technically, the US political system. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care, guys. Speak to you soon. And please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Please subscribe, press the button above, and that would be very cool. Thank you very much. Take care. Toodle pips.